6 weeks ago, the Colorado Avalanche were on top of the hockey world, winning the Stanley Cup. But how has the offseason been going? Kyle Sullivan, the co-host of Locked On Avalanche, joins us to discuss the changes in Colorado and what it'll mean for the Avalanche Stanley Cup defense. All that and more coming up on this episode of the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to the Locked On NHL podcast. Gil Martin, so glad to be with you here as I am every Monday. And thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline had you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the show Shaggy Von Doom himself, Kyle Sullivan. Kyle, the Avalanche winning the Stanley Cup, first time in quite a while, and finally meeting the expectations they've had the last few years. And yet, how common is it that a team wins the Stanley Cup and then changes starting goaltenders?
Yeah, it's not that common at all, but it goes back to Joe Sakic and now Chris MacFarland, who's now in that GM role. It's all about this mindset that they put in place a long time ago and sticking to that mindset. It's not so much a slight on the goaltender per se, it's trying to make the bottom line work. And if you see the Avalanche and the moves they made, it was basically retaining the team they had, with the exceptions of Nazem Kadri. Everybody came back. And what Darcy Kemper was asking for was not going to be viable to keep this team together. So they went out and got Georgiev. Is that going to work? We'll find out. But it's all about the bottom line and keeping that team together and not putting yourself in a bind that you've seen Toronto and teams of that nature overpay for a goaltender or a goaltender stable. The Avalanche did not want to fall prey to that, especially in a competitive West. Joe Sakic and MacFarland were not going to do that. So Darcy Kemper walked, and it's Georgiev and Francouz going into 2023.
How confident do you feel that Georgiev can be the number one goaltender of this team? And I guess with a team as offensively talented as the Avalanche are, how good does he really have to be to get them through the regular season at least?
Well, that's a great point right there. Like if you ask my co-host on Locked On Avalanche, Chris Maselli, about Georgiev, he is not a big fan. Like he watches his Rangers games and he keeps an eye on them. And he was telling me as soon as that deal was made, we don't want him there. And if you ask me, I have been a Pavel Francouz cheerleader for years. That was a gig that he almost beat out Philip Grubauer for that starting job, and Grubauer had the hot hand and won that starting position. Fast forward to this, we thought this was going to be Francouz finally getting the starting gig, and here comes Georgiev, and Sakic said on draft night, no, he's in here for the number one spot. So Francouz takes a back seat. So we're all, as Avalanche fans, going to see if Georgiev can hold up to this Avalanche style of defense. But honestly, the defense is one of the most underrated portions of the Avalanche. With Nathan McKinnon, Gabe Landeskog, and Mikko Rantanen, you could talk about them all day long. But with Taves and Makar, EJ, now Josh Manson, the defensive core is really stacked for the Avalanche, and they play in a way that they protect their goalie. You see how Philip Grubauer was in Colorado and then how he was when he arrived in Seattle. Darcy Kemper might face that as well when he goes to Washington, when the two caliber defenses between Washington and Colorado are night and day. So we'll see if Georgiev settles in, but I honestly feel like the race between the two goaltenders is a hot hand situation.
Yeah, and you know, sometimes that works very well. Sometimes it backfires depending on the goalies, the team, the temperament. We'll have to see how it plays out. You talked a little bit about Nazem Kadri. First of all, is there any chance he does re-sign with the Avalanche? And if not, how do they replace his productivity?
Well, thankfully for the Avalanche, Joe Sakic and MacFarland have been building up the Colorado Eagles in the AHL. They're deep, and honestly, with the talent that the Avalanche have, it's been kind of, for lack of a better term, constipated there. Everybody's just kind of sitting in the AHL waiting for their spot, but that Avalanche team is so deep, it's hard to find your way. That's why everybody's looking forward to this training camp. Who's going to make that jump? Because it depends on the day and how the wind blows on how you feel about Nas coming back to Colorado. That this holdout, he's waiting for the Avalanche to make room for some money and to bring him back, or it's another team trying to do the same. You never know. It's always a tweet away that could change the direction of a fan base on how they feel about Nas. And it's one of those that I don't feel like it's going to be that big of an adjustment because of everything the Eagles have. And it's honestly just promote from within, just move the lines up just a little bit. And I think the Avalanche are going to be fine because this team has been known to outscore their opponent. And they had games where they were scoring 7 goals, 6 goals. And like last season, Nazem Kadri was a pivotal member of that. But the lines 3 through 4 and what the Eagles have, they could do exactly what he did, and they're a little bit younger.
What is the cap situation right now in Colorado, and how does that affect their plans between now and the start of training camp in about a month?
It's getting tight. It's getting tight, but it's workable. Everybody knows the front office works best in Colorado at the trade deadline. That's where Joe Sakic makes his moves. And McFarland, who has trained under Sakic for years, he's going to be doing the exact same. They have enough to play with when it comes to the trade deadline. But of course, this is the NHL. And if you've watched NHL for any period of time, you know injuries can wreak havoc on a team at any time. Thankfully, depth also helps out the Avalanche because we talked about Georgiev and Fred Sos, but the Avalanche also have Justus Annunen waiting in the wings in Loveland. So it depends on what position goes down and who's hurt and where and at what point in the season. But the depth is going to carry them through. Keep an eye on where the Avalanche are sitting at the trade deadline. That's where the noise is going to be made. It might not be right now because it was just getting the band back together for another run. The trade deadline is where the adjustments will be made.
You talked about some of the young prospects who have been sort of stuck at the AHL level. Who are some of the players that hockey fans should keep an eye on when training camp opens up?
Well, I'm a huge Sampo Ranta fan. He had a chance last year, and he need a little bit more refinement. He might make a splash this year. We have players like Justin Barron just itching. We have Jean-Luc Foudy. Also, he's ready to make that case. And we still have, I know it's kind of an oxymoron, but veterans in the AHL right now that this could be their last chance. And that's why everybody's pointing at this training camp. There are a lot of players that would like to make that last chance effort. So if you would like to keep an eye on what this Avalanche team is going to be doing next year, keep an eye on training camp and who makes noise and who is the loudest. If it's a narrative around how good this team looks, then it's nothing much is going to change. But you're looking for players to really make their name against this top tier talent. And this is the chance to do it because if it's not now, it's going to be a while. And then you're going to see players start leaving left and right. But this training camp is going to be very important for the Avalanche.
No question about that. Kyle, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they can follow you and where they can find the podcast in order to keep up with all of these developments?
If you like to find the show, it's LOPN_Avalanche on Twitter, Locked On Avalanche on Instagram. We're also on YouTube. You can find us there for your best coverage of the Avalanche every day.
And where can they find you on social media?
You can find me at Shaggy Bondu everywhere you look.
All right. Kyle Sullivan, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me on, my friend.
Today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's great joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor. Ready? Delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right. Built has done it again. Let me introduce you to your new favorite. It's cookie dough chunk puffs. They have a light, chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course, like all Built Bars, they are covered in 100% real chocolate. It has all the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it, plus it's healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs have only 160 calories, but pack a whopping 15 grams of protein. And look, You can run to built.com right now, snag a box for you and the family. It's the perfect treat, or you could find a really good hiding place and just hoard them for yourself. And what's great about Built is that all bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. Go to built.com right now. Use promo code LOCK15. You'll get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com.